I cried over a $100 refund for my canceled wedding. My ex sneered. Until the planner checked my escrow and choked. She has $205 million. But before I explain how a dumped, broke girl who shopped for dented canned goods at the dollar store suddenly had the net worth of a Hollywood A-lister sitting securely in her checking account, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Trust me, you are going to want to hear every single detail of this. The floors of Apex Escrow and Trust were carved from imported Italian marble, polished to such a blinding, immaculate shine that I could literally see the reflection of my scuffed, 3-year-old canvas sneakers staring right back at me. The air inside the vaulted, cathedral-like lobby was thick and intimidating, smelling heavily of old money, freshly brewed artisanal espresso, and the sharp, spicy notes of designer cologne. I, on the other hand, smelled like generic discount laundry detergent and the unmistakable, lingering scent of absoluta, crushing desperation. I stood in the center of the gold-trimmed lobby, instinctively pulling my faded blash, oversized gray hoodie tighter around my thin frame. I felt like an absoluta intruder, an insect that had somehow crawled into a jewelry box. This wasn't a standard neighborhood credit union where you go to cash a modest birthday check. This was an elite, high-security financial institution that handled multi-million-dollar escrow accounts, trust funds, and blind deposits for the city's top 1%. I was only here because this was the mandated banking partner for my former wedding planner, and I desperately needed my money back. Well, what was left of it? Anyway, across the thick, bulletproof glass counter stood Brenda, a bank teller whose razor-sharp blonde bob and aggressively manicured acrylic nails screamed corporate arrogance. She was currently looking at me as if I had just tracked raw sewage onto her sacred marble floor. But Brenda wasn't the problem. The problem was the 3 people standing to my immediate left. Vivienne, the elite high society wedding planner I had foolishly hired back when I still believed in fairy tales, was wrapped in a tailored Burberry trench coat, aggressively tapping her diamond-encrusted Cartier watch, and standing right beside her, practically radiating smugness, was Marcus, my ex-fiancé, the man who had completely destroyed my life just 3 weeks ago. He had his arm wrapped tightly around the impossibly thin waist of Chloe, a plastic surgery-obsessed trust fund heiress, who looked like she sweat pure champagne. I really don't understand why we are pausing our VIP consultation to deal with this situation. Vivienne sighed loudly, rolling her eyes so hard, I thought they might actually get stuck in the back of her skull. The main deposits were non-refundable when your fiancé, excuse me, your former fiancé canceled the contract. The remaining escrow balance is a pathetic $100. Honestly, the banking fees to print the paperwork cost me more than the actual refund. I swallowed the massive, sterile, agonizing lump forming in my throat. My eyes burned violently with unshed tears, but I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted copper. I absolutely refused to cry in front of them. They didn't know that my primary checking account was currently overdrawn by $12. They didn't know that my rent was already 3 days late, or that I had literally skipped dinner for the last 2 nights just to ensure I had enough gas money to drive to this ridiculous bank. Please, Vivienne, I whispered, my voice trembling slightly despite my desperate efforts to keep it stoic. I just need the escrow closure processed, so the remaining funds transfer back to my linked checking account. I need that $100 today. Marcus let out a sharp, cruel bark of a laugh. He looked me up and down, his eyes lingering on the frayed cuffs of my hoodie with utter disgust. Jesus, you are pathetic. Marcus sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. Still begging for pennies. I see. I told you, Chloe. This is exactly why I had to leave her. She is an anchor of poverty. Imagine being hysterical over $100. Chloe giggled, a high-pitched, grating sound that made my teeth ache. She leaned into Marcus, casually flashing a massive, flawless 5-carat diamond ring that blinded me under the bank's chandelier lighting. Ew, it's honestly just sad. Bab Vivienne. Can you just have the teller throw her a dirty $100 bill so she can go buy her little instant noodles? The air over here is starting to smell like a thrift store. Vivienne scoffed. A short sound of pure, upper-class solidarity. She turned to the teller. Just process the beggar's refund. Brenda, void the escrow and link it to her primary. I have a $200,000 tasting menu to finalize with my real clients, and I cannot stand at this counter for another minute. Brenda offered Vivienne and the wealthy couple a sympathetic, knowing smile before turning her cold, dead eyes back to me. She loudly popped a piece of chewing gum in her mouth, her jaw working with rhythmic, visible annoyance. Fine, slide your ID. I'll pull up your global financial profile. Dump the remaining $100 into your primary checking account. And wipe you from the system. I slid my worn-out, slightly cracked plastic ID card under the thick glass. Brenda snatched it with 2 fingers, wiping it against her blazer as if it carried a highly contagious disease. She turned to her massive dual-monitor setup and began aggressively typing on her mechanical keyboard. Clack, clack, clack. She was hitting the keys with so much force, it sounded like she was trying to punish the computer. Honestly, they need to start enforcing a minimum net worth policy just to walk through the front doors here, Brenda muttered under her breath, intentionally loud enough for Marcus and Chloe to hear. They snickered in agreement. I kept my head down, staring intently at the swirling patterns in the marble floor. Just endure it, I told myself. Just get the $100. Walk out of here, go to the grocery store, and figure out how to survive tomorrow. Just breathe. Click. Brenda hit the enter key to merge my closed escrow file with my primary banking profile. For 2 excruciatingly long seconds, the grand lobby was completely silent, save for the soft, ambient jazz playing from the hidden ceiling speakers. Then the banking terminal emitted a soft, high-pitched ding. I didn't look up, but I heard the exact, precise millisecond that Brenda's jaw stopped chewing. The rhythmic, annoying popping of her gums ceased entirely. A heavy, suffocating, unnatural silence suddenly fell over the counter. When I finally raised my eyes, I noticed that Brenda was completely frozen. Her hands were hovering awkwardly over the keyboard, stiff as wooden boards. She slowly leaned forward, her face mere inches from the glowing LCD screen, her eyes wide, unblinking, and locked onto whatever numbers had just populated on her monitor. Thinking the ancient banking software had crashed, she reached out with a trembling index finger and slammed the refresh button. The screen blinked. The numbers remained. Suddenly, the haughty, smug aura that had been radiating from Brenda vanished completely, replaced by a raw, primal, absolute terror. I watched in utter, morbid fascination as all the color rapidly, violently drained from her face. Within 3 seconds, her skin turned the sickly, translucent color of spoiled milk. A thick and heavy bead of cold sweat broke out on her forehead, rolling down her temple and ruining her expensive matte foundation. Her chest began to heave as she started taking short, shallow, panicked breaths. Brenda! What on earth is taking so long? Vivienne snapped, furiously checking her diamond watch. Highly annoyed by the sudden delay. Did her pathetic little account bounce the wire transfer fee because I am not paying for it? Brenda couldn't speak. Her lips parted, but only a dry, raspy, choking wheeze came out. Her hands were now shaking violently, so violently that when she blindly tried to grab her computer mouse, she knocked her heavy metal pen holder completely off the desk. It hit the floor with a loud, echoing crash, sending expensive luxury pens scattering everywhere. Mom, Brenda finally stuttered, her voice cracking into a high-pitched squeak. She slowly, mechanically looked up from the screen and stared directly at me. The sheer, unadulterated look of fear in her eyes sent a cold chill straight down my spine. It was as if she were looking at a ghost, or a cartel boss holding a detonator. She looked, terrified of me. Oh, for heaven's sake, move over. Vivienne huffed impatiently. She pushed past the teller's window partition and leaned aggressively over the counter to look at the private monitor herself. Let me see what the system error is. I swear, dealing with poor people is an absolute nightmare. Vivienne never finished her sentence. The moment the elite wedding planner's eyes registered the string of digits glowing in bold green font on the banking terminal, she physically stumbled backward, as if she had just been shot in the chest. She gasped violently, her hand flying up to desperately clutch her thick pearl necklace. She tried to inhale, but she literally choked on her own breath. A loud, ugly, guttural wheezing sound echoing through the dead-silent lobby. "No," Vivienne whispered, her knees visibly buckling beneath her designer trench coat. That is mathematically impossible." She looked at the glowing screen, then slowly turned her head to look at my cheap, faded hoodie, and then whipped her head back to the screen. Her perfectly manicured hands were now shaking just as badly as Brenda's. She has. Vivienne stammered, her voice completely devoid of its former arrogance, replaced by a hollow, trembling, awestruck panic. "Brenda, tell me the system is broken. Tell me I am not looking at $205 million. $205 million. The words hung in the suffocating air of the bank lobby, echoing in my ears like a distorted siren. But to understand the absolute, mind-bending absurdity of that number, and why it caused an elite wedding planner to literally lose her breath, you have to rewind time. You have to go back exactly 5 days. 5 days ago, I didn't have millions. I didn't even have tens. My checking account balance was glaring back at me from my cracked smartphone screen in angry red font. Fu Charmeyen. Sishisan. My reality was a masterclass in modern survival. I lived in a cramped, drafty, a fourth-floor walk-up apartment where the heater sounded like a dying lawnmower and the carpet permanently smelled of wet dog and despair. My dinner that night, and the 3 nights prior, consisted of generic brand beef instant noodles, heavily watered down to make the cheap broth last longer. I remember sitting on my sagging futon, painstakingly sorting out a small jar of tarnished pennies and dimes, praying I had enough to run a single cycle at the local laundromat. I was drowning. The crushing weight of student loans, combined with a recent layoff from my entry-level marketing job, had pushed me to the absolute edge of a financial cliff. But I thought I at least had love. I thought I had Marcus. We had been together for 4 years. We were supposed to be a team, building our life from the ground up. We had scrimped and saved for 2 years, just to afford the non-refundable deposits for our upcoming wedding. But, as it turned out, Marcus wasn't interested in building a life. He was only interested in upgrading his own. The betrayal didn't happen with a tearful conversation or a mutual realization that we were drifting apart. It happened on a dreary Tuesday evening. With all the calculated brutality of a corporate firing, he didn't knock. He simply unlocked my apartment door and walked in, carrying a brand new, expensive leather duffel bag. I immediately noticed he was wearing a tailored Italian suit I had never seen before, and his hair was slicked back with an expensive pomade that smelled of bergamot and cedar. He looked like a stranger. "Marcus," I had asked, standing up from my pile of laundry quarters, "where did you get that suit?" He didn't look me in the eye. He just started throwing his few valuable possessions, his gaming console, his watch collection, his designer sneakers into the leather bag. "We're done. The wedding is off," he stated, his voice as cold and flat as a concrete floor. I froze, the cheap packet of ramen seasoning slipping from my fingers. What? What are you talking about? We get married in 3 weeks. We just paid Vivienne the final catering deposit. He finally stopped packing and turned to face me. The look of utter contempt in his eyes is something I will never, ever forget. There was no love left. Not even pity. Just disgust. "Look around you," Marcus sneered, gesturing broadly at my pathetic, dingy apartment. "I am suffocating in this poverty. You are an anchor, dragging me down to a life of clipped coupons and dollar menus. I am a man with ambition, and I refuse to spend the rest of my life financially carrying a broke loser." The words felt like physical blows to my chest. I couldn't breathe. "Marcus, I just lost my job. I'm trying." "Trying isn't enough," he snapped. Then a cruel, mocking smile curled his lips. "Chloe doesn't try. Chloe just bought me a brand new Porsche as an early wedding gift." Chloe. The name tasted like ash in my mouth. Chloe was a notorious, plastic surgery-obsessed trust fund heiress who frequented the upscale gym where Marcus worked as a personal trainer. She was known for wearing diamonds to the treadmill and treating the staff like indentured servants. "Yes, Chloe," Marcus said, zipping up his bag with a satisfying finality. "She's heir to a real estate empire. She just came into her trust. We are getting married. She's giving me the life I actually deserve." He walked toward the door, pausing only to look back at the jar of coins on my table. He let out a harsh, barking laugh. "You can deal with Vivienne and the wedding cancellation yourself. Fight over the scraps of the escrow if you want. I don't care about peasant change anymore. Oh, and lose my number. Chloe hates it when poor people text me." And just like that, the door slammed shut. 4 years. Erased in 4 minutes. I didn't cry that night. I was too completely hollowed out by the sheer financial terror of my reality. Without Marcus's half of the rent, I was facing immediate eviction. The electric company had already sent a final disconnection notice. I had absolutely nothing. The next morning, driven by pure, unadulterated desperation, I tore through my apartment looking for anything I could pawn or sell, but I had no jewelry, no electronics of value. My eyes wildly scanned the room until they landed on a heavy, douce, exceptionally ugly ceramic vase sitting in the corner by the door. I used it to hold cheap plastic umbrellas. I had bought it at a neighborhood thrift store 3 years ago for exactly $5. It was heavy, adoul, muddy greenish-brown color, covered in a thick layer of grime and what looked like ancient soot. It was garbage. But earlier that week, I had seen a flyer for a free community outreach appraisal drive hosted by Sotheby's at a downtown convention center. They were offering free evaluations of family heirlooms and antiques for the public. I figured maybe, just maybe, it was some kind of mid-century knockoff. If a pawn shop or an antique dealer gave me $50 for it, I could pay my electric bill and buy real groceries for a week. I wrapped the heavy, ugly vase in a faded bath towel, shoved it into a cheap canvas tote bag, and took a 2-hour bus ride in the pouring rain to the convention center. When I arrived, the event was pure chaos. Hundreds of people were lined up with fake paintings and worthless grandfather clocks. When I finally reached the front, the exhausted junior appraiser barely even looked at me. He unwrapped the towel, glanced at the grimy vase, and frowned. "It's heavily oxidized. I can't even see the base glaze," he muttered, rubbing his tired eyes. "Look, our lead Asian antiquities expert is in a back room. I can leave it for him to look at when the crowd dies down. But you can't wait here. If it's worth anything over $100, we'll email you. Just sign this standard proxy evaluation waiver and leave it." I was too exhausted and heartbroken to argue. I hastily scribbled my signature on a thick stack of legal jargon I didn't bother to read, handed over the dusty $5 umbrella holder, and walked back out into the rain. I didn't expect to hear back. I wrote it off as a total waste of bus fare. I completely forgot about the ugly thrift store vase. My mind was consumed by the agonizing humiliation of my breakup, the threat of eviction, and the desperate need to reclaim my final $100 from Vivienne's escrow account just to survive the week. Which brings us right back to the polished marble floors of Apex Escrow and Trust. Right back to Vivienne, clutching her pearls, gasping for air, and staring at a computer screen that declared I was richer than God. "Tell me I am not looking at $205 million. Vivienne's voice wasn't just shaking. It was fracturing into a million terrified little pieces. She gripped the edge of the marble counter so hard her knuckles turned a ghastly white. The elite wedding planner, a woman who routinely humiliated brides for not affording imported orchids, was staring at me with the wide, horrified eyes of a peasant who had just accidentally insulted a ruthless empress. Marcus, completely oblivious to the apocalyptic shift in the room's power dynamic, let out a loud, aggressive groan. "Vivienne, what the hell is going on?" Marcus snapped, stepping forward and trying to peer over her shoulder. "Did her pathetic little account bounce? Is her credit score so toxic it crashed your system? Tell the teller to hurry up. Chloe has a spa appointment at the Ritz." "Yeah, seriously. This is getting ridiculous," Chloe whined. aggressively crossing her arms and tapping her designer heels against the floor. Just give the beggar her dirty $100 and let's go. Marcus shoved past Vivienne, reaching his hand out to grab the banking terminal monitor to look at the screen himself. Let me see what the error. Security. Go to red. Lock the terminal. A voice boomed through the lobby like a cannon blast. Before Marcus's fingers could even brush the plastic casing of the monitor, the heavy, frosted glass double doors of the executive suite violently burst open. Out sprinted a man I recognized from the gold placard on the wall. Mr. Sterling, the senior branch manager of Apex Escrow and Trust. He was a man who usually never left his corner office unless a billionaire was making a deposit. Right now, Mr. Sterling was moving with the frantic, desperate speed of a man trying to defuse a bomb. His custom Armani suit jacket was flapping open, and his face was flushed a deep, panicked crimson. Lock the screen. Brenda. Now he roared. Brenda, sobbing softly in pure shock, wildly slammed her palm onto a red button beneath her desk. A thick, opaque privacy filter instantly snapped across the glass barrier, completely blacking out the monitor and blocking Marcus's view just milliseconds before he could see the numbers. Hey, what is your problem? Marcus yelled, recoiling as two massive, armed security guards suddenly materialized from the shadows, placing their heavy hands on their holsters and stepping directly between me and my ex-fiancé. Mr. Sterling completely ignored Marcus. He didn't even look at Chloe. He practically shoved his way through the velvet ropes, bypassed the teller counter, and rushed straight toward me. The entire lobby had gone dead silent. Everyone was staring. To my absolute horror, Mr. Sterling, a man who managed the wealth of tech moguls and oil barons, skidded to a halt mere inches from my scuffed canvas sneakers, bowed deeply, and looked at me with an expression of sheer, unadulterated reverence. "Mom," he breathed, his voice trembling as he wiped a thick layer of cold sweat from his forehead with a silk handkerchief. I am so profoundly, incredibly sorry. There are no words to excuse this catastrophic failure of our hospitality, that you were made to stand in the public lobby, that you were subjected to this environment. It is unforgivable." Marcus let out a bark of incredulous laughter. "Are you out of your mind? She's a broke loser. She's here begging for $100 refund because she's getting evicted." Mr. Sterling slowly turned his head. The look he gave Marcus was so lethally cold, so utterly dripping with aristocratic disdain, that Marcus physically took a step back. "Sir Mr." Sterling said, his voice dropping to a dangerously quiet octave, "if you raise your voice in the presence of this client again, I will have my security team physically throw you through the front glass windows." "Do not speak to her," Chloe gasped, clutching Marcus's arm. "Do you know who my father is? We are bringing a $50,000 cashier's check to this bank today. I do not care if you brought the gold reserves of Fort Knox." Mr. Sterling snapped, waving his hand dismissively. "You are standing in the presence of an Apex Tier 1 account holder. Remove yourselves from her breathing space immediately." Before Marcus or Chloe could even process the humiliation of being scolded like unruly peasants, Mr. Sterling turned back to me, his posture softening into absolute submission. "Please, Ma'am, the public floor is not safe for someone of your stature. Come with me immediately. The VIP vault suite has been secured for you." I couldn't speak. I was completely paralyzed. My brain was utterly short-circuiting. But the two armed guards gently but firmly formed a protective wall around me, and I numbly followed Mr. Sterling away from the teller counter, leaving Marcus, Chloe, and a hyperventilating Vivienne staring open-mouthed at my retreating back. We bypassed a maze of biometric security scanners and heavy steel doors until we entered the VIP vault room. The air inside smelled of rich mahogany, aged leather, and absolute silence. It was entirely soundproofed. Original Picasso sketches hung on the walls. Mr. Sterling locked the heavy vault door behind us. His hands were shaking so badly that when he tried to pour me a glass of imported sparkling water from a crystal decanter, the glass rattled loudly against the table. "Please, sit," he urged, practically pulling out a plush leather chair for me. "We received the Level 5 alert from the Federal Reserve Clearinghouse 20 minutes ago. We were just verifying the international SWIFT codes when you enrelsen, when you simply walked into the front lobby. We thought it was a security test. Mr. Sterling, I croaked, my voice cracking wildly. I don't understand. I just came for my escrow refund. I need my $100. That's it. There is a mistake. Mom, there is no mistake, he said softly. He reached into his suit pocket, pulled out a thick, military-grade encrypted tablet, and unlocked it with his thumbprint. He placed it delicately on the mahogany table and slid it across to me. Your international wire transfer cleared all federal holds at 9:00 a.m. this morning. The funds have settled securely in your primary checking account. Tax-free. Post-auction. I looked down at the glowing screen, right below my name. In bold, undeniable green font, was a string of numbers so long, my brain literally refused to process them as reality. Available balance. 205 yuan. 450. Ling 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 ling. I stared at it. I blinked. I rubbed my eyes violently. I stared at it again. The numbers didn't move. $205,450,000. My heart didn't just drop. It felt like it completely stopped beating. A cold, terrifying numbness washed over my entire body. The edges of my vision started to go black. This wasn't a lottery win. This was cartel money. This was international terrorism money. This was the kind of money that gets a black bag thrown over your head in the middle of the night. Oh my God, I gasped, pushing the tablet away as if it were a live grenade. Oh my God, I didn't do it. I swear to you, I didn't steal this. Is my identity stolen? Did a Russian hacker use my social security number? Mom, please calm down. Calm down. I shrieked, jumping out of my chair, my chest heaving in a full-blown panic attack. I have $12 I eat ramen noodles with tap water. Why are there $200 million in my account? Are the feds outside? Are you stalling me for the FBI? I just wanted my $100. Take it back. Tell them I don't want it. I was hyperventilating, backing myself into the corner of the mahogany vault, ready to surrender to the authorities. Mr. Sterling raised his hands in a placating, desperate gesture. Mom, nobody is coming to arrest you. The money is legally, entirely, and irrevocably yours. It is 100% clean. From where? I screamed, my voice echoing off the soundproof walls. Mr. Sterling took a deep breath, walked over to the secure wall monitor, and picked up a remote control. From Geneva. Mom, from Sotheby's International. He clicked the remote, and the massive screen flickered to life. I have the executive director of their global antiquities division waiting on a secure, encrypted video feed to explain everything. Please, just look at the screen. The massive 80-inch wall monitor in the VIP vault flickered, the encrypted static giving way to a crystal-clear video feed. On the screen sat two older men in a brilliantly lit, ultra-modern boardroom, overlooking what looked like the Swiss Alps. One man wore a sharply tailored tweed suit, looking like a distinguished British aristocrat. The other was a younger, predatory-looking man in a sleek charcoal pinstripe suit. The universal uniform of a high-tier wealth management lawyer. Ah, miss, you are finally secure. The older British man spoke, his accent thick and deeply formal. He let out a massive, visible sigh of relief. I am Alistair Montgomery, Global Director of Asian Antiquities for Sotheby's International. And this is Mr. Vance, Senior Partner at Vanguard Wealth Legal. We have been trying to reach your mobile phone for 48 hours. My phone was disconnected yesterday, I whispered, still pressed against the mahogany wall, my hands trembling. I couldn't pay the bill. Alistair blinked, a look of profound, aristocratic confusion crossing his face. Right, well, I assure you, mispaying telephone bills will no longer be an issue for the rest of your natural life, nor the lives of your next 5 generations. He leaned closer to the camera, his eyes practically gleaming with a feverish intensity. Miss, do you recall the item you dropped off at our community appraisal drive this past Tuesday? I stared at him, my brain struggling to connect the dots. Tuesday. The rain. The exhausting bus ride. The desperate hope of getting $50 to keep my lights on. The vase stammered, wrapping my arms around my cheap hoodie. The ugly, heavy green one. I bought it at a thrift store for $5 to hold my wet umbrellas. Alistair physically flinched. He clutched his chest as if I had just stabbed him. $5 umbrellas. He looked at the lawyer, horrified, before turning back to me. Miss, what you so casually used to store wet rain gear was not an ugly green vase. It was the legendary, undocumented Imperial Dragon Celadon vessel, crafted exclusively for the personal chambers of the Wanli Emperor during the Ming Dynasty. My jaw unhinged. I literally couldn't process the words coming out of his mouth. But it was covered in soot and black grime. It looked like garbage. That grime, Alistair explained, his voice hushed with absolute reverence, was a centuries-old protective lacquer applied by loyalists to disguise the treasure during the fall of the dynasty. It remained hidden, passing through ignorant hands for hundreds of years, eventually winding up in an American charity shop. When my lead appraiser wiped away a fraction of that lacquer on Tuesday afternoon and saw the imperial seal, he fainted. Literally fainted. My legs gave out. I slowly slid down the mahogany wall until I was sitting on the plush carpet, my head spinning. But I didn't authorize a sale. I cried out, the lingering paranoia of the FBI still gripping my chest. I just dropped it off. I didn't say you could sell it. Mr. Vance, the shark-like lawyer, finally spoke up, tapping a thick file on his desk. Actually, Mom, you did. Because you did not want to wait in the 3-hour evaluation line. You signed our standard Class A blind proxy execution waiver. I remembered the exhausted junior appraiser shoving a clipboard at me, and me hastily scribbling my signature just so I could catch the bus home to cry over my eviction notice. That waiver, Vance continued, his tone entirely clinical, grants Sotheby's the absolute, irrevocable right to immediately transport and auction any item deemed high-risk global treasure to protect it from theft. The moment we authenticated it, we mobilized a private security team. We flew it on a chartered jet straight to our underground Geneva vaults that very night. Alistair picked up the story, his eyes wide with the thrill of the auction. Because the artifact had been lost to history for 400 years, introducing it to the public market would have taken months of red tape. Instead, we held a highly secretive, invite-only midnight auction for our top-tier private collectors, only billionaires. I sat on the floor, holding my breath. It was a bloodbath, Alistair said, a wide, almost terrifying smile spreading across his face. A prominent royal family member from Dubai became absolutely obsessed with it. He engaged in a ruthless, ego-driven bidding war against a Silicon Valley tech magnate. The hammer finally fell at an astronomical, record-breaking sum. Mr. Vance adjusted his tie and looked directly into the camera. After Sotheby's staggering commission, International Transport Assurance, Swiss auction taxes, and the expedited clearing fees to bypass the 30-day escrow hold, your net payout, fully cleared by the IRS and legally registered to your Social Security number, is exactly $205. So 0000. The lawyer held up a single, black leather folder to the camera. You are legally a centimillionaire. Mom, the money is 100% clean. It is yours, forever. The video feed clicked off. The massive screen went black, leaving only my reflection staring back at me in the dark glass. I sat on the floor of the vault for a long time, the total silence of the soundproof room pressed against my ears. Mr. Sterling stood quietly in the corner, offering me a warm, damp towel to wipe my face, treating me with the delicate care one reserves for a monarch. $205 million. I looked down at my hands. They had stopped shaking. The suffocating, iron-fisted grip of poverty that had crushed my chest for years, the fear of starvation, the terror of eviction, the absolute humiliation of being tossed aside for a rich girl, it simply evaporated. It vanished into thin air, replaced by a cold, heavy, untouchable armor. I wasn't the broken, dumped girl crying over ramen noodles anymore. I was a financial god. Mr. Sterling, I said, My voice completely changed. It was no longer high and panicked. It was low, smooth, and chillingly calm. Yes, ma'am, anything. Namit, he responded instantly, bowing his head. I slowly stood up, brushing the invisible dust off my cheap, oversized hoodie. I looked at the encrypted tablet on the table, the green numbers glowing like a loaded weapon. I thought about Marcus up there in the lobby, sneering at my frayed sleeves. I thought about Chloe, laughing at my request for a $100 refund. I thought about Vivienne, treating me like a stray dog tracking mud onto her pristine floors. They thought I was an anchor of poverty. They thought they were the elite. Is Vivienne, the wedding planner, still upstairs in her consultation showroom? I asked, my eyes locking onto Mr. Sterling. Yes, Mom, he replied, checking his smartwatch. She rents the luxury showroom on our second floor. I believe your former associates went up there to finalize a contract. A slow, icy smile curled the corners of my mouth. Excellent. Would you like me to have security remove them from the premises? Mr. Sterling asked eagerly, clearly ready to throw Marcus out the front door himself. No, I replied softly, picking up the tablet and slipping it into my cheap canvas tote bag. I don't want them removed. I want to pay them a little visit. But first, I need a card. Mr. Sterling didn't just hand me a piece of plastic. He walked over to a biometric wall, safe hidden behind a framed oil painting, scanned his retina, and pulled out a sleek, matte black velvet box. He opened it with the reverence of a priest presenting a holy relic. Resting on a bed of black silk was a solid titanium Apex Centurion black card. It was heavier than any credit card I had ever seen, its edges lined with micropave diamonds, and my name was laser-etched into the dark metal with flawless precision. This is our highest-tier limitless physical card. Mum, Mr. Sterling explained, his voice hushed. It bypasses all standard global credit algorithms. It is directly linked to your $205 million reserve. You could walk into a luxury dealership right now and buy an entire fleet of supercars with a single tap, and the system wouldn't even blink. I reached out and picked it up. The cold, heavy metal sent a literal shockwave of power up my arm. I didn't put it in my worn-out pleather wallet. I simply dropped the multi-million-dollar limitless card into the bottom of my cheap, frayed canvas tote bag, letting it rest right next to a half-empty pack of generic chewing gum. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I know my way to the second floor. Mom, please, allow me to escort you. Allow me to handle them, he pleaded, desperate to prove his loyalty. No, I replied softly, offering him a chilling, calm smile. This is something I need to do myself. I want to see exactly who they are one last time. I took the private VIP glass elevator up to the second floor. As the doors slid open, I stepped out into Vivienne's sprawling luxury wedding showroom. The aesthetic was nauseatingly opulent. The air was heavily perfumed with imported white lilies. The floors were covered in plush white carpets, and crystal chandeliers hung low over velvet love seats. I kept my faded, oversized gray hoodie pulled tight, my scuffed canvas sneakers making absolutely no sound on the thick carpet. In the center of the main showroom, sitting on a pristine white velvet sofa, were Marcus and Chloe. Vivienne was standing over them, acting less like a professional planner and more like a desperate servant, eagerly pouring them glasses of vintage Dom Perignon champagne into crystal flutes. And we will import the white peacocks directly from Kyoto for the garden reception, Vivienne was saying, giggling like a schoolgirl. The Crystal Estate is going to look absolutely magical for you two. It is the premier mega venue of the state. After all, I stood in the archway, quietly observing the scene. The Crystal Estate was the ultra-luxury venue Marcus and I had originally booked. It took us 2 years of aggressive saving just to afford the entry-level package. Now he was sitting there with his new heiress, stealing my exact venue, on my exact date, and upgrading it with her daddy's money. Excuse me, I said, my voice cutting through the clinking of crystal and forced laughter. All 3 heads snapped toward me. The warm, fawning smiles on their faces instantly evaporated, replaced by expressions of extreme visceral disgust. Marcus slammed his champagne flute down on the glass table. Are you actually stalking me now? Is this a joke? he demanded, his face contorting with anger. I told you we are done. Stop following me. Yup se ho. Chloe dramatically covered her nose with her manicured hand, leaning away from me as if my mere presence were airborne radiation. Ugh, Vivienne. I thought you told the bank tellers to throw her out. Why is this homeless-looking girl in your private showroom? Security should really spray this building for pests? Vivienne's face turned scarlet with rage. She slammed the champagne bottle into an ice bucket and marched toward me, her designer heels clicking aggressively. How dare you come up here? Vivienne ist, pointing a perfectly polished acrylic nail inches from my face. You were supposed to take your pathetic $100 refund and leave through the service exit. This floor is for elite clients only. You are completely ruining the aesthetic of my showroom. I didn't flinch. A few hours ago, her yelling would have reduced me to tears. I would have hung my head in shame, apologizing for my poverty, shrinking away to go cry on the bus. But right now, I was standing there with the GDP of a small island nation sitting in my canvas bag. The contrast between my outward appearance and my actual, terrifying financial reality was so intoxicating, it almost made me laugh. I can't get my refund until I sign the official venue release documents for the Crystal Estate, I said smoothly, my voice completely devoid of emotion. I came to sign the cancellation, so you can legally give my date to them. Marcus scoffed loudly, leaning back into the velvet sofa and kicking his expensive Italian loafers onto the glass table. God, you are so pathetic it actually hurts to watch, Marcus sneered, looking me up and down. Still obsessing over that date? Still crying over that petty cash? Let me show you what real money looks like, you broke loser. He snapped his fingers at Chloe. With a vicious, triumphant smirk, Chloe unclasped her Chanel purse and pulled out a crisp, embossed piece of banking paper. She slammed it onto the glass table. Take a good look. Peasant, Chloe taunted, her eyes gleaming with pure malice. That is a $50,000 cashier's check. That's just our upgrade deposit for the Crystal Estate. That's more money than you will make in the next 5 years. We are taking your venue. We are taking your date. And we are throwing the high society wedding you could never even dream of affording. Marcus laughed, pulling Chloe closer to him. Exactly. While you're eating instant noodles in that depressing, smelly apartment, I'll be sipping $100 scotch in a tuxedo. You were just a placeholder until I found a real woman. Now do us all a favor. Sign the trash papers. Take your $100 and crawl back to whatever dollar store hole you climbed out of. Vivienne sighed dramatically, exhausted by the mere effort of dealing with me. She marched over to her mahogany desk, grabbed a manila folder, and practically threw it at my chest. It fluttered to the floor, spilling the cancellation documents onto the pristine white carpet. Pick it up, sign the bottom line, and leave, Vivienne commanded, her voice dripping with absolute contempt. And take the stairs down. I don't want you breathing in the VIP elevator. Now hurry up. You are wasting our time. And the real VIPs need to finalize their catering menu. I looked down at the papers scattered on the floor. I looked at Marcus, who was smirking at me with a look of pure, unadulterated victory. I looked at Chloe, who was taking a selfie with her $50,000 check. And I looked at Vivienne, who was glaring at me like I was a piece of garbage stuck to her shoe. They thought they had won. They thought they had broken me. They thought their little $50,000 piece of paper made them gods. And my faded gray hoodie made me an insect. I didn't bend down to pick up the papers. Instead, I stood perfectly still. I let a long, slow, chillingly calm smile spread across my face. I looked at the three of them with the detached, absolute superiority of an apex predator watching mice play in a trap. You know, Vivienne, I said, my voice echoing quietly in the luxurious room, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to sign the cancellation. The silence that followed my words was so absolute you could have heard a pin drop on the thick velvet carpet. For a brief, suspended second, the three of them just stared at me. Then Marcus let out a harsh, barking laugh, shaking his head as if I had just lost my mind. Are you deaf? Or just incredibly stupid? Marcus sneered, standing up and towering over me. You don't have a choice. You can't afford the venue. Your little $100 escrow is the only thing keeping you from starving to death on the street. Sign the damn papers and get out of here before I call security and have you physically thrown out." Vivienne crossed her arms, her face contorting into an ugly, furious scowl. "This is not a negotiation, you delusional little girl. The Crystal Estate requires a minimum baseline expenditure of $200,000. I have real VIP clients sitting right here with a $50,000 deposit check. You are trespassing in my showroom," Chloe giggled maliciously, wrapping her arms around Marcus. "Honestly, babe, maybe we should let her stay. She can be the dishwasher at our reception. She clearly needs the minimum wage." I didn't blink. I didn't raise my voice. I simply kept that cold, detached smile on my face as I slowly reached my hand into my faded, cheap canvas tote bag. My fingers brushed past my keys, past the half-empty pack of generic gum, until they closed around the heavy, cold titanium of the Apex Centurion black card. "You're absolutely right, Vivienne," I said smoothly, pulling my hand out of the bag. "The Crystal Estate is a premier venue, and it would be an absolute tragedy to let it be ruined by people with such cheap taste." With a flick of my wrist, I tossed the card. It didn't flutter like a normal piece of plastic, because it was solid titanium. It hit the thick glass table with a loud, heavy, authoritative thud. It slid smoothly across the glass, coming to a dead stop right on top of Chloe's pathetic little $50. Thousand cashier's check. The overhead crystal chandeliers caught the micropave diamonds encrusted along the edges of the card, sending a blinding spray of refracted light across the room. My name was laser-etched perfectly into the matte black metal, right above the undeniable, globally recognized insignia of an Apex Limitless Reserve account. Marcus stared at it, his brow furrowing in confusion. "What the hell is this? A fake novelty card you bought online? Are you trying to flex on us with a piece of metal?" But Vivienne didn't speak. Vivienne, a woman whose entire career revolved around catering to the ultra-wealthy, knew exactly what she was looking at. Only billionaires carried that card. It wasn't something you could apply for. It was something handed to you in a biometric vault. I watched in glorious, cinematic slow motion as the blood completely drained from Vivienne's face. Her haughty, arrogant posture instantly collapsed. Her jaw practically unhinged, her perfectly lined lips parting in sheer, unadulterated horror. She literally started to hyperventilate, her manicured hands shaking so violently, she had to grip the edge of the glass table just to keep from falling over. "No," Vivienne gasped, her voice nothing but a terrified, airy squeak. She stared at the card, then looked up at my faded hoodie, and then back at the card. This is a Centurion Reserve. This requires a minimum verified liquid balance of $205 million. I finished for her, my voice carrying the lethal, quiet authority of an executioner. Fully cleared, tax-free, sitting securely downstairs in Mr. Dady Sterling's vault. Marcus froze, his smug sneer wiped right off his face, replaced by a look of profound, agonizing confusion. What are you talking about? She's broke. Vivienne. She's lying. She couldn't even afford her half of the rent. Run the card, Vivienne, I commanded, stepping forward. I wasn't the broken girl anymore. I was the apex predator in the room. Run it right now. Because I am not just keeping my wedding date, I am buying out the entire Crystal Estate for the whole weekend. Vivienne scrambled. She practically threw herself across the desk, completely ignoring Chloe, as she shoved the heiress's $50,000 check onto the floor like a piece of worthless trash. With trembling, sweaty hands, Vivienne grabbed her high-tier merchant terminal and snatched my black card. "Wait, what are you doing?" Chloe shrieked, her voice pitching into a hysterical whine. "We have a contract. We gave you $50,000. Shut up, Chloe," Vivienne snapped, a hysterical edge to her voice as she frantically typed on the terminal. She didn't even look at the heiress. Her absolute loyalty had already shifted entirely to the unimaginable wealth standing in front of her. "I want the entire property completely locked down for my exclusive, Private use. I continued, my voice echoing through the opulent showroom. No other events. No other guests. I will pay the buyout penalty, the staff overtime, and a premium convenience fee. Charge it for $5 million. Right now, Marcus physically staggered backward, his eyes bulging out of his skull. 5 million. Are you insane? Beep. The merchant terminal emitted a bright, cheerful chirp. Allons. Pristine white receipt began to print immediately. There was no decline. There was no fraud alert. The system simply approved a $5. Ling 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 ling. 00 transaction in less than 3 seconds. The sound of that receipt printing was the loudest thing in the room. It was the sound of absolute destruction. Vivienne looked at the approved receipt, and the last shred of her dignity vanished. She literally dropped to her knees right there on the white velvet carpet. She scrambled forward, grabbing my scuffed canvas sneakers, looking up at me with tears of pure, desperate terror streaming down her face, completely ruining her expensive makeup. Mom, I am so sorry. Vivienne ne sobbet, her voice a pathetic, groveling whine. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. Please. I will personally oversee your event. I will fire my entire staff if they ever disrespect you again. Please do not ruin my business. I looked down at her with absolute disgust. Get off the floor, Vivienne, and void their contract. Now yes. Yes. Immediately, Vivienne scrambled up, wiping her snot-nosed face. She turned to Marcus and Chloe. Her eyes suddenly filled with venom. Your reservation is legally voided. The estate has been bought out by a superior client. Take your pathetic little check and get out of my showroom. Chloe burst into hysterical, ugly tears, clutching her Chanel bag to her chest. You can't do this. My daddy is a real estate developer. You can't steal my wedding venue. I didn't steal it. Chloe, I said, leaning in close, my eyes locking onto hers. I bought it, with pocket change, because unlike you, I don't need my daddy's money. Now you and Marcus have no venue, no date, and less than 3 weeks to find a new place to get married. Marcus looked like he was going to vomit. His pristine Italian suit suddenly looked incredibly cheap. His face was the color of wet ash. He looked at me, truly seeing the multi-millionaire standing in front of him, realizing the colossal, astronomical mistake he had just made. He had thrown away a kingdom for a shiny pebble. Baba Marcus stammered, taking a step toward me, reaching out a trembling hand. Wait, we can talk about this. I didn't mean those things I said. I was just stressed. We can fix this. I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound that sliced right through his pathetic ego. There is no we. Marcus, I whispered, picking up my black card from the terminal and dropping it back into my cheap tote bag. And as for my event at the Crystal Estate, I'm not having a wedding. I'm throwing a lavish, $1 million singles party, and you are definitely not invited. The sight of Marcus standing there in the middle of that pristine white showroom, completely broken, his hand outstretched in a pathetic attempt to win me back, was the most profoundly satisfying moment of my entire life. Get out of my sight. Marcus, I said, my voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried the undeniable, crushing weight of absolute authority. Before I buy the gym you work at and fire you myself. He didn't say another word. His mouth opened and closed like a dying fish, but no sound came out. The realization of what he had just thrown away, the astronomical Tafur, generational wealth, he had willingly traded for a tacky heiress, and a leased Porsche shattered his ego into 1,000,000 irreparable pieces. He looked physically ill. Vivienne didn't even give them the dignity of a slow exit. Desperate to prove her newly sworn loyalty to my bank account, she aggressively summoned building security. Within seconds, 2 massive guards arrived and unceremoniously escorted a sobbing, hysterical Chloe and a zombified Marcus out of the elite showroom. They were forced to take the service elevator down to the alleyway, clutching their useless $50. 000. Cashier's check. Like a piece of garbage. That was the last time I ever spoke to them. But high society is a very small, very gossipy world. And the fallout of that afternoon echoed through the city's elite circles like a shockwave. Because Vivienne wasn't just a wedding planner, she was the gatekeeper to the city's luxury vendor network. To save her own reputation and desperately try to stay in my good graces, she immediately blacklisted Marcus and Chloe. She made one phone call, and suddenly, every high-end florist, Katia, and venue manager in the tri-state area refused to take their money. With less than 3 weeks until their wedding date and their names completely toxic in the luxury community, reality crashed down on them hard. Chloe's father, furious at the public humiliation and the sudden scandal, completely cut off her wedding fund, telling her she was on her own. Let me paint a vivid picture of their big day. They didn't get the Kyoto peacocks. They didn't get the vintage Dom Perignon. Without any luxury venues willing to risk my wrath, Marcus and Chloe were legally forced to hold their high society wedding at the only place with an immediate opening, the Starlight Motor Inn, a depressing, 2-star motel located right next to the interstate highway. I heard through mutual acquaintances that their ceremony took place in the cracked asphalt parking lot, right between a humming ice machine and a row of rusted dumpsters. Chloe reportedly cried through her entire vow exchange, not out of love, but because a massive 1.8-wheeler drove past on the highway, blaring its air horn and completely drowning out the officiant. Marcus stood there in his tailored Italian suit, looking absolutely miserable, realizing he had tied himself to a spoiled, cut-off brat, forever haunted by the ghost of the $200 million he had let slip through his fingers. Karma wasn't just a concept anymore. I had bought it in cash, and it was beautiful. Meanwhile, on that exact same Saturday, I was experiencing a completely different reality. I drove up the winding, private driveway of the Crystal Estate in a chauffeured, armored Maybach. I had paid a staggering $5. Ling 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 ling. 00 premium just to secure the entire 50-acre property for myself and a handful of my closest, most loyal friends. The ones who had offered me their couches when I was facing eviction. The ones who had bought me groceries when my bank account was deeply in the red. The estate was breathtaking. Vivienne, terrified of losing my future business, had gone above and beyond. The sprawling manicured gardens were draped in thousands of imported white orchids. A live string quartet played modern pop songs on the grand terrace. And yes, out of pure, hilarious spite, I even kept the white Kyoto peacocks roaming the manicured lawns. I wasn't wearing a faded gray hoodie anymore. I was wearing a custom-tailored, emerald green silk gown that flowed around me like water. I stood on the grand marble balcony overlooking the private lake, holding a crystal flute filled with champagne that cost more than my old apartment's yearly rent. I took a slow sip, the crisp, chilled liquid bubbling on my tongue. I closed my eyes and listened to the distant sound of my friends laughing by the infinity pool. The soft music, the gentle rustle of the wind through the ancient oak trees. I reached into my designer clutch and pulled out my new phone. I opened the banking app, the biometric scanner instantly recognizing my face. The screen loaded, and there it was, sitting safely in my Apex Centurion Reserve account, completely untouched by the extravagant party I was throwing. Lambaling Wumeyuan Ibai Wusher? Ling 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 ling. I stared at those numbers, feeling a profound, overwhelming sense of calm wash over my entire soul. When I was poor, I thought money was just a tool to buy things. I thought it was about sports cars, designer labels, and massive mansions. But standing there on that balcony, surrounded by unimaginable opulence, I finally understood the true secret of the ultra-wealthy. The greatest luxury that money buys isn't the physical items. It's the absolute, unshakable peace of mind. It was the knowledge that I would never again have to count pennies in a laundromat. I would never again have to skip a meal just to afford bus fare. I would never again have to cower in front of people like Marcus or Chloe, letting them dictate my worth based on the frayed cuffs of my sweater. I was untouchable. I was free. The ugly, $5 thrift store vase had completely shattered my old reality. And from its dusty ashes, I had built an empire. I took one final look at the glowing green numbers on my screen, smiled, and locked the phone. slipping it back into my clutch. The party was just getting started. And for the first time in my entire life, I wasn't worried about the bill. What would you do if a $5 thrift store find turned you into a multi-millionaire overnight? Would you brutally ruin your ex's life like I did? Or would you just buy a private island and disappear from the world entirely? Let me know in the comments below. Hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next story.